The laughter of the galaxy echoed through the marble halls of the Galactic Council, rolling like thunder across the stars, alien delegates wiping tears from their eyes as the announcement played across every broadcast channel. Earth, the young and primitive species from the Sol system, had joined the Interstellar Military Alliance, a council of empires that had fought wars longer than humans had existed. To the old races, it was a joke too good to resist. "They still use boots," hissed General Karth of Zyrak IV, his scaled mouth curling into a sneer. "They fight in lines, shoulder to shoulder, like ancient tribes with sticks." His laughter was joined by the crystalline tones of the Vetari envoy, whose glass-like body shimmered with amusement. "I saw one of their training feeds," she said, "marching in rhythm, shouting commands, so primitive it's almost art." Across the chamber, laughter swelled louder, and for the first time in years, the council was united, not in purpose, but in mockery. The humans didn't respond. They didn't send threats or angry speeches. They simply prepared. In orbit around Luna, the first Terran expeditionary fleet assembled, not flashy or ornate like alien ships, but sharp and functional, gray hulls covered in armor plating that looked worn even when new. From a distance, they seemed lifeless, but up close, each ship pulsed with quiet power. Inside those hulls, thousands of men and women stood ready, not laughing, not shouting, just listening to orders in silence. The atmosphere was tense but calm, filled with a kind of discipline the galaxy had forgotten existed. To humanity, war wasn't glory, it was math, motion, muscle memory, and survival. Admiral Jonathan Hale, the commander of the expeditionary fleet, stood before the central viewport, his reflection faint against the blue glow of Earth. He had seen the broadcasts, heard the alien laughter, watched their smug faces mocking his people. But none of it mattered. "Let them laugh," he said softly to his officers. "It'll make the silence that follows mean more." Around him, officers nodded without a word. No one needed speeches. Humanity had never been a race that relied on grandstanding. They had learned long ago that the universe doesn't care about pride. It only respects results. When the day of the joint military drills arrived, the great fleets of the galaxy gathered above the barren moon of Ush 7, a dead rock chosen as neutral ground. Thousands of ships filled orbit, gleaming with alien metals, banners of every empire shining in the black void. The Zyrak fleet arrived first, massive dreadnoughts covered in spikes and war paint, their energy signatures flaring bright as if to announce dominance. The Corellian carriers followed, sleek and elegant, their hulls humming with light, and then came the crystalline fleets of the Vetari, their ships shaped like prisms that refracted sunlight into dazzling rainbows. Every race wanted to be seen, to be admired, to remind the galaxy who ruled the stars. And then, finally, the humans arrived. The Terran fleet entered orbit in complete silence. No trumpets, no banners, no shining armor, just a formation of dull gray ships that moved as one, like pieces of a single machine. They didn't send a greeting transmission. They didn't broadcast power levels. They simply took position in the dark and waited. "Are their ships even working?" one alien joked. "They look like scrap." Another laughed. "Maybe they forgot how to turn on the lights." Their laughter grew louder when the Terran troop carriers descended to the surface. "They're deploying soldiers," scoffed a Zyrak officer. "Real soldiers? On foot." On the ground, the alien armies were already assembled for inspection, colorful lines of troops carrying energy weapons that glowed in the sunlight. They moved with grace and arrogance, each army showing off its unique technology. Floating infantry units, plasma drones, mechanized giants taller than buildings. The humans landed last, their drop ships releasing waves of soldiers who stepped out in perfect silence, boots striking the dirt in unison, their armor matte black, faces hidden under helmets with no insignia, no rank markings, no names. A hush fell across the field as thousands of Terrans formed into lines, each one moving with mechanical precision, every motion practiced to perfection. The alien commanders exchanged glances, amused and curious. "What are they doing?" one asked. "Standing," another replied with a laugh. "Maybe they're frozen with fear." But the humans were not frozen. They were waiting. Admiral Hale stood on the command platform overlooking the field. His voice, when it came through the comms, was steady and cold. Formation Delta. March! And they moved. The ground shook as 10,000 human soldiers stepped forward in perfect rhythm, boots hitting the surface like the ticking of a colossal clock, each sound blending into the next until it became one continuous beat that echoed through the air. Dust rose in waves around them. Their movements were seamless, synchronized, like a living tide. No one spoke. No one hesitated. When they turned, it was with precision so perfect it seemed unreal. Every motion mirrored, every step exact. The alien spectators who had been laughing now stood silent. The Vet-Harry delegation, who prided themselves on elegance, found themselves speechless. Even the Zyrak general who had mocked them earlier felt his chest tighten. "That's not normal," he whispered. "No army moves like that." The humans kept marching, their lines splitting, rejoining, reforming in new patterns that shifted like clockwork, creating formations that adapted to invisible orders. They didn't need to see their commander. They didn't need constant direction. They moved as though they shared one mind. The aliens, used to chaos and noise in their drills, couldn't comprehend it. There was no shouting, no calls, no hesitation. Only the sound of boots, heartbeat steady, relentless. At last, the Terran lines halted. Thousands of soldiers froze mid-step, their final stomp hitting the ground in perfect unison, the sound so sharp it echoed through the mountains. Then silence. Not a twitch. Not a breath. The wind itself seemed to stop. Admiral Hale raised one hand, and every soldier raised their rifles as one, the movement smooth, terrifying in its unity. Across the field, alien officers felt the hair rise on their necks. The humans weren't showing off. They were demonstrating control. "By the stars," muttered a Corellian observer, his voice trembling, "they're machines." "No," whispered another, "they're worse." The aliens began to whisper among themselves, realization slowly spreading through their ranks. The humans weren't displaying strength for pride. They weren't performing for approval. They were practicing for war. The kind of war that left no room for error, no room for hesitation, no mercy for those who made mistakes. The kind of war that humanity had learned to fight when their own world had nearly destroyed them. When the drill ended, the aliens broke formation, their own armies returning to camp, trying to forget the unease crawling up their spines. But the humans didn't move. They stayed in their lines, waiting for the next command. Finally, Admiral Hale spoke again. "Dismissed." As one, 10,000 rifles lowered, 10,000 boots shifted, 10,000 soldiers turned, and in silence, they returned to their transports. Not a single voice was raised. Not one broke formation. It was as though they had left part of themselves behind on that field, the sound of precision that still echoed in the minds of everyone who had heard it. In the council chambers that night, the laughter was gone. The Zyrak general who had mocked them earlier stood before the council, his scales pale, his voice unsure. They are not what we thought," he said quietly. "They fight for something else." The chancellor frowned. "Fear?" "No," the general replied, shaking his head, "for order. For unity. For something I can't understand." But the truth was simpler than that. Humanity didn't fight for conquest or recognition. They fought because they remembered what chaos felt like. They fought to keep it from happening again. When the council sent out the official review of the drills, the report was only 3 lines long. And though the council didn't admit it publicly, every empire began revising its battle protocols that night. Every commander who had seen the humans march ordered new training regimens. Every general demanded more discipline, more silence, more control. But no matter how they tried, none could replicate the sound of that march, that single heartbeat of a species that had turned survival into art. From that day forward, the galaxy stopped laughing at Earth's armies. Because in that brief, terrible silence between the first step and the last, they had all felt the same thing, the quiet, suffocating certainty that if humanity ever truly marched to war, no power in the stars could stand in their way. The laughter had faded, but arrogance never dies easily in the galaxy. It hides, waits, and whispers behind polished smiles. The same council that once mocked humanity now tried to pretend that their amusement had been misunderstood. Of course, the Chancellor said during a public broadcast, "Our admiration for Earth's military discipline was genuine." But in private chambers, the tone was different. "They're efficient," hissed General Karth of Zyrak 4. "But efficiency is not dominance." His clawed hands slammed on the table. "They rely too much on unity. Break their rhythm and they'll fall." Others agreed, eager to restore their pride. They couldn't stand that a young world of dirt and water had made them feel small. They called secret meetings, made secret plans, convinced themselves that the humans could never stand against the true horrors of war. After all, the galaxy had been fighting for millions of years, and Earth had only just stepped into the stars. They didn't understand yet that humans had never needed time to learn how to fight. They were born fighting. On the Terran flagship Resolute, Admiral Jonathan Hale stood before the tactical screen, the reflection of distant stars flickering across his face. Reports from the frontier filled the air with quiet tension. "Sir," his intelligence officer said, "we've confirmed it. Zyrak fleets are mobilizing near the colony at Helios Prime." Hale's expression didn't change. "How many ships?" "At least 8,000, came the reply, "and that's just what we can see." Hale nodded once, calm as stone. "Then we'll move." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the Council hasn't sanctioned deployment." Hale turned his gaze slowly, his voice steady. "We're not waiting for permission, we're protecting our people." That was the difference between humanity and the others. The Council debated, argued, voted, and calculated, but humans acted. They didn't need approval to defend their own. And when word spread that the Terran fleet had mobilized without Council orders, shock rippled through every capital in the galaxy. "They'll doom us all," shouted the Vetari delegate. "They're reckless," cried another. But the Chancellor's voice was quiet, almost fearful. "Or maybe," he said, "they simply remember what courage feels like." The Zyrak Dominion believed they would crush Earth in a single campaign. They had fought hundreds of wars, exterminated dozens of species. They saw humans as insects in uniform. Their fleet moved through space like a storm of metal and flame. Their broadcasts filled with taunts. "Turn back, Terrans," they said, "and we might spare your moon." The human response was silence. As always, the Terrans didn't waste words, they simply moved, their fleet of grey ships slipping through the dark like shadows, smaller, fewer, but faster, coordinated beyond logic, every ship in formation, every move synchronized. It wasn't chaos, it was choreography. The first battle took place over the crimson skies of Helios Prime. The Zyrak fleet surrounded the colony, confident and loud, their ships glowing with energy, their cannons charging. "Make them run," barked the Zyrak admiral. "Show them what a real army looks like." But as his fleet advanced, something strange happened. The Terran ships didn't retreat, they didn't scatter. They held position, and then, without warning, the void erupted with blue light. Railguns fired in perfect rhythm, like the beating of a heart, every shot striking exactly where it needed to. No wasted energy, no random fire. Every Zyrak ship that moved into range was hit once, just once, and then drifted dead and silent. The admiral screamed, "Return fire." But the targeting systems failed, the sensors scrambled, the human fleet was gone, cloaked in shadows and angles, invisible to scanners, moving like ghosts between the stars. Inside the bridge of the Resolute, Hale stood unmoving as the battle unfolded. "Status," he said calmly. "Enemy formation breaking," replied his officer. "Secondary fleet entering from the flank." Hale nodded. "Signal the ground division, execute Phase 2. And down on the planet, the real war began. Terran drop ships entered the atmosphere without light or sound, their hulls glowing faintly red from friction. When they hit the ground, they didn't scatter. They marched, their boots striking alien soil in perfect rhythm. Lines of armored soldiers moving forward through smoke and flame. The Zyrak defenders had never seen anything like it. Their enemies weren't charging with fury or screaming in fear. They were advancing like time itself, steady, unstoppable, inevitable. The Zyrak commander on the ground, General Rythar, watched from his command post, disbelief twisting his voice. "Why aren't they stopping?" he demanded. "They're outnumbered 10-1. But no one could answer. The humans just kept coming, their formation unbroken even as plasma blasts scorched the ground. Every time a soldier fell, another stepped forward without hesitation. No shouting, no hesitation, just movement, perfect and cold. "They're not soldiers," Rythar whispered. "They're Something else, and when the Terran line reached his position, it didn't stop. They surrounded his bunker with eerie precision. Their leader stepped forward, visor reflecting his terrified face, and spoke in a calm, human voice, "Stand down." Rythar hesitated, then ordered his troops to fire. The battle lasted 3 minutes. When the smoke cleared, Helios Prime was silent. The Terrans didn't raise flags, didn't cheer. They simply secured the colony, tended to their wounded, and rebuilt the defenses as if it were just another day's work. Admiral Hale's report to Earth was brief. Helios Prime secured. Minimal losses. Enemy retreat confirmed. No victory speeches. No celebrations. Just facts. The Council, however, was not pleased. They summoned him for questioning. "You acted without authorization," the Chancellor said, his voice trembling with anger. "You endangered interstellar stability." Hale's eyes were calm. "You mean you endangered it by waiting?" he replied quietly. "We acted before more lives were lost." "You disobeyed direct orders," shouted another delegate. Hale leaned forward slightly, his words measured. "You're mistaking silence for weakness, and peace for permission. Humanity doesn't wait for disaster to begin before it does the right thing." The chamber fell silent, his voice echoing like thunder in their ears. Outside the council halls, alien civilians gathered around public screens replaying footage from Helios Prime. Humans marching through fire, standing shoulder to shoulder, their banners dark and unmarked, soldiers lifting the wounded, helping even enemy civilians to safety. "They're not like us," whispered one alien engineer. "They don't fight for territory." "Then why do they fight?" asked another. And the answer came from an old miner who had seen too much war. "Because someone has to." Across the stars, fear began to turn into respect. Planets that once mocked Earth now sent envoys seeking alliance, asking for Terran advisors to train their armies, to teach them discipline, and everywhere the same realization spread. Humanity didn't fight because it wanted to. It fought because it refused to forget what helplessness felt like. Yet even as peace spread, the Zyrak Dominion was not done. Their pride wounded beyond repair. Their leaders gathered in secret, swearing vengeance. "They think they're saviors," hissed General Karth. "But they're just another empire waiting to fall." And so, in the shadows, the seeds of another war began to grow. But for now, in the quiet halls of the Terran fleet, Admiral Hale stood on the bridge, looking at the stars, his hands clasped behind his back. "They'll come again," said his aide softly. "They always do." Hale nodded slowly. "Then we'll be ready," his voice calm, certain, final. "And when they return, the galaxy will stop laughing forever." And as the Resolute turned toward the next horizon, engines glowing blue, the faint hum of marching soldiers echoed through the void, steady, disciplined, eternal. The heartbeat of humanity that no galaxy could ever silence again. The fires of Helios Prime had barely faded when the galaxy began to tremble again. The Zyrak Dominion had been humiliated, their fleets broken by a species they once called insects, and their generals could not bear it. Revenge was not just a desire, it was a creed. In the war chambers of Zyrak 4, a plan began to form, one whispered in shadows and carved in hatred. "They took our pride," growled General Karth, his claws dragging across a holographic map, "so we'll take their home." The other warlords nodded, each one hungry to erase the shame. Their fleets began to move, hidden under false coordinates, cloaked in radiation clouds, thousands of ships heading not for the front lines, but for Sol itself, Earth, the world that dared to march into their wars and win. Far away, deep in the cold silence of space, aboard the Terran flagship Resolute, Admiral Jonathan Hale stared at the faint pulse of Earth's light on the star map, the blue shimmer flickering like a heartbeat among the stars. He had fought enough wars to feel when one was coming. The air itself seemed heavier, the comm channels too quiet. "Sir," said his communications officer, "Council channels have gone dark." Hale didn't look away from the screen. "Because they know something they don't want to say," he murmured. "Get me Earth Command." Within minutes, the transmission connected, static crackling as the image of General Arya Voss appeared, her expression hard and tired. "You've heard it too?" she asked. Hale nodded. "They're coming," she exhaled slowly. "Every scan we have shows energy surges near the Perseus Gate. We estimate at least 10,000 ships." Hale's jaw tightened. "That's not a fleet," he said. "That's extinction." Back on Earth, the news spread fast. The skies over every Terran city filled with the glow of mobilization. Factories came alive, shipyards thundered, and recruitment halls overflowed not with fear, but with resolve. There were no cries for mercy, no debates, no hesitation, just one unified order: defend home. Every man and woman knew what was at stake. They remembered the history of their world, how they had survived wars, diseases, and disasters, how they had rebuilt from ashes again and again. Earth had always stood alone before, and it had always endured. Now it would stand again. But this time, it would not stand silently. In orbit, the Terran fleets assembled, thousands of ships emerging from dockyards across Mars, Luna, Titan, and beyond, smaller than alien dreadnoughts, simpler in design, but built with purpose. Each one was a blade, unmarked, cold, efficient. The Council watched from afar, terrified. "They can't fight them all," said the Veterinary Chancellor. "It's impossible." But another voice spoke softly, one of the few who remembered Aelio's prime. "You said the same thing before." As the Zyrak Armada crossed into Terran space, they found nothing: no resistance, no defenses, no signals, only silence. "Cowards," hissed Karth, "they've run." His fleet advanced cautiously, sensors scanning every direction. "Keep formation," barked his second. "Their tricks won't save them this time." But deep inside every captain, unease grew. The void felt wrong, too still, too empty, until a faint sound began to play over their channels. At first just static, then a voice, calm, human. Familiar. "Attention, unidentified fleet. You have entered restricted Terran space. Turn back immediately." Karth laughed. "Or what?" He snarled. "You'll talk us to death." And then, before he could finish, the stars blinked. Every Zyrak sensor went blind at once, radar scrambled, communications lost, ships collided in confusion, and then, from the darkness, light exploded, not from the front, but from below, Terran ships rising from the black like ghosts, weapons silent until the perfect moment, and then, fire. Railguns tore through the Zyrak lines in synchronized bursts, guided by AI precision and human instinct. No wasted shots, no wild strikes, just rhythm, like the sound of marching boots turned into thunder. Every Terran vessel moved in coordination, one turning as another fired, one shielding as another advanced. It wasn't a battle, it was a performance. "Retreat," screamed a Zyrak captain, "they're everywhere." But there was nowhere to go. The humans had boxed them in with invisible walls of interference, a trap that closed from all sides. Even as ships exploded, Terran vessels didn't chase. They didn't shout victory. They simply moved forward, reclaiming the space they had owned since birth. Admiral Hale's voice came over the fleet comms, calm and controlled. "Hold formation, they'll break soon." And they did. The Zyrak ships scattered, fleeing in every direction, discipline gone, courage gone. The Great Dominion reduced to chaos while humanity moved as one. In the chaos, the Zyrak flagship Bloodfang broke through, engines screaming. General Karth stood at the viewport, his eyes wide as human ships cut through his fleet like a surgeon's knife. "How?" he roared. "They're outnumbered 20-1. But the truth was simple. Numbers didn't matter when your enemy never missed, never hesitated, and never stopped. He slammed his clawed hand against the console. "Target their flagship." But when his weapons officer tried, the targeting system froze. Replaced by a line of Terran code, words scrolling across the screen. "We see you." Karth's blood ran cold. "They're inside our systems," he shouted. But it was too late. Every ship in his formation powered down, every engine cut off, and then, from the dark, a single Terran ship drifted forward, its lights dim, its guns silent, a message transmitting across every channel. "You brought your war to our home. Now you'll learn what home means to us." What followed wasn't war, it was annihilation with purpose. The Terrans didn't destroy for pleasure. They disabled, captured, dismantled. Every ship they crippled was left floating, its crew alive but disarmed, its engines shut down but intact. Humanity didn't need bodies to prove victory. They needed witnesses. They wanted the survivors to remember, to tell the galaxy what it felt like when Earth stopped holding back. The battle lasted 6 hours, but for the Zyrak Dominion, it felt like forever. By dawn, only debris drifted in Terran space, and those who lived carried a single message home: do not return. On the Resolute's bridge, the light of the burning fleet reflected in Admiral Hale's eyes, his crew silent, the hum of systems filling the void. "It's over," whispered his first officer. Hale didn't move. No, he said quietly, it's just begun. He knew this wasn't the end. The galaxy would watch this battle, twist it, fear it, and prepare for the next. Transmit to Earth, he ordered, message code 21. The officer hesitated. That's the old code, sir. Hale nodded. Yes, he said. It's time they remember why we were called professionals. The message was sent, short and sharp. 3 words that rippled across every human ship, every colony, every soldier on standby: march to victory. And across the void, the engines of Earth's fleets ignited once more, not in rage, not in hate, but in duty. The sound of war drums carried in silence through space, steady, disciplined, unbroken. The march of a species that had learned to turn survival into perfection. And somewhere, in the ruins of his command, General Karth looked out at the stars, whispering in disbelief. They don't fight like us. They fight like they've done this 1,000 times before. And deep down, he finally understood the truth. The galaxy had laughed at Earth's armies, but now, it would never laugh again. The smoke of the Zyrak defeat still drifted through Terran space when the galaxy began to whisper again. Fear spread faster than light. Worlds that once mocked Earth now spoke its name with caution. The Council tried to control the panic, but even their polished words could not erase what everyone had seen. The images of human fleets moving like one living organism. The soundless precision of railguns tearing through the dark, and the calm voice of Admiral Hale echoing through every intercepted broadcast: home defended. Those 2 words changed everything. They became legend, and legend became warning. The Zyrak Dominion was broken, their fleets shattered, their pride dead. But pride has a way of surviving in corners where logic dies. The surviving generals fled to the outer sectors, gathering their broken ships, plotting in silence, swearing that the war wasn't over, not while they still breathed, not while humanity still stood. In the quiet halls of the Galactic Council, the atmosphere was colder than vacuum. No one laughed anymore. Every delegate sat in uneasy silence as the Chancellor's voice trembled through the chamber. We have underestimated the Terrans, he said. We must reassess their capacity. But the word capacity was too small for what humanity had shown. It wasn't just strength. It was will turned into movement, order shaped into instinct. They had fought like memory itself, like the universe had been waiting for them to return, and the oldest species among them, the crystal-bodied Vethari, spoke softly. We are not witnessing an army, she said. We are witnessing evolution. The chamber fell silent again. On Earth, preparations didn't stop. The shipyards worked day and night. New fleets rising faster than logic allowed. Terran engineers called it the expansion protocol. Not a campaign of conquest, but of reach. Every corner of human space fortified, every colony armed. But there were no banners, no anthems, no propaganda, only quiet purpose. Admiral Hale stood aboard the Resolute, watching a new line of ships emerge from the docks. His second officer approached. Sir, the Council has requested that we stand down. They say the war is over. Hale's expression didn't change, his voice steady as steel. Wars don't end because someone declares them over. They end when no one has the courage to start another. In the Outer Rim, the broken Zyrak fleets merged with other rogue factions, mercenaries, warlords, even deserters from the Council armies, all united by one idea: revenge. They called themselves the Restoration Front, promising to rebuild the Dominion and erase humanity. Their leader, a scarred Zyrak veteran named Varnak, stood before his gathered captains, his voice rough with hatred. They think they've won, he growled. But they have only awakened the storm. They hide behind discipline, behind silence, but I will show them chaos again. I will show them fear. His fleets roared approval, their ships cobbled together from wreckage and rage. They knew they couldn't face humanity head-on, so they chose a darker path. They would strike where it hurt most, not Earth itself, but its colonies, the worlds that carried its hope. The first attack came without warning, a Terran agricultural world named Eden 3, a planet of farmers and families, no soldiers, no fleets, only sunlight and peace. The Restoration Front appeared above its skies like a black tide, raining fire across the fields. Cities burned, communications died. By the time the distress signal reached Earth, millions were gone, and the words of one dying colonist haunted every frequency. We thought we were safe. We thought they wouldn't come. The next day, the Terran response began, not in rage, but in silence. A single phrase was sent across every fleet channel. March for Eden. In less than 24 hours, the Terran Armada appeared at the edge of the Eden sector, hundreds of ships unfolding from the void, the sky itself turning grey under their presence. The Restoration fleet barely had time to react before the first human transmission cut through the static. Admiral Hale's voice, low and calm, "You have one chance. Surrender." The enemy commander laughed. "You won't destroy this planet just to reach us." Hale's reply came instantly, "You're mistaken. We'll save it by removing you." The Terran ships descended with surgical precision, every strike hitting only enemy positions, every maneuver designed to protect the civilians below. The aliens fired wildly, destroying their own ships in panic. But the humans didn't miss once. Every railgun round struck true, every fighter formation moved like thought itself. And when it ended, the Restoration fleet was gone, not destroyed, dismantled, engines disabled, crews alive but silent. And the people of Eden 3 watched in stunned disbelief as human soldiers descended, not to conquer, but to rebuild. The images spread across the galaxy, Terran Marines lifting rubble with bare hands, helping alien families rebuild their homes, sharing food with survivors of all species. No anger, no arrogance, only quiet resolve. It confused the galaxy more than any victory could. "Why help those who would have killed you?" asked a council reporter to a human soldier, and the soldier, covered in ash and dirt, simply said, "Because we remember being them." That one sentence became a message that spread faster than any fleet, a reminder that humanity's strength was not only in war, it was in mercy that didn't need witnesses. But the mercy of humans frightened the council more than their weapons ever could, because mercy meant control. It meant the power to choose who lived and who didn't, and the council knew, deep down, that humanity was now the unspoken center of the galaxy, not by decree, but by fear and respect. "We can't let them rise unchecked," muttered the Chancellor. "We must remind them of their place." But none dared act, because every spy, every probe, every whisper sent toward Earth vanished before reaching orbit. The Terrans knew, always knew, they didn't need spies. They were the silence between transmissions, the echo in every system, the shadow in every network. Admiral Hale stood before the command map one night, stars glittering like fireflies around his silhouette. His officers waiting quietly. "They'll come again," he said, "and when they do, it won't be out of hate, it'll be out of desperation. They'll convince themselves it's survival, and we'll remind them that survival is something we perfected long before we left our planet." He turned away, his reflection disappearing into the window's darkness. "We don't fight for power. We fight so no one else has to learn war the way we did." As his fleet drifted through the void, engines humming softly, a message pulsed through Terran space, encrypted but clear, a code known to every soldier from the lowest recruit to the highest admiral: "The march continues." And so it did, not in noise, not in spectacle, but in quiet precision, the same rhythm that had shaken the galaxy since the first time a human boot touched alien soil. A rhythm that told every world watching that the age of laughter was over. The age of silence had begun, and in that silence, the universe finally began to understand what it truly meant when humanity marched to battle. The battle for Eden 3 had ended, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the sound of any war. Across the galaxy the broadcasts played endlessly, the footage of Terran soldiers walking through smoke and ruin, not as conquerors but as caretakers, their hands carrying water, their rifles slung behind them, their armor stained with dust and blood. To the civilians watching from light years away it was impossible to understand. They had seen armies before, they had seen victors parade and defeated cry, but never this, never an army that rebuilt the world it had just saved. Humanity had done something no one in the galaxy could explain. They had won, and yet they did not celebrate, they did not boast, they simply continued their work in silence. That silence terrified the powerful and comforted the weak. It was the silence of certainty, of discipline so absolute it felt divine. In the halls of the Galactic Council, unease spread like infection. The Chancellor called an emergency summit, alien voices rising in panic and paranoia. "They control half the trade routes now," shouted the merchant guilds. "Their fleets answer to no one," cried a Vetari envoy. "They could destroy us all." But amidst the noise one voice remained calm. A scholar from the old archives who had studied every Terran transmission since first contact. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "They could have destroyed us all long ago, but they didn't, and that's what frightens you, isn't it?" The chamber fell silent, the truth heavier than fear. Meanwhile, on the Resolute, Admiral Hale reviewed the reports, holograms flickering before him showing casualty lists, resource allocations, and reconstruction updates. His officers stood at attention, none speaking until spoken to. How many civilians lost on Eden? Hale asked. 32,000 confirmed, sir, replied his aide, less than 1% of what it could have been. Hale's face remained emotionless. Less than 1%, he repeated softly, and still too many. He dismissed the staff with a nod, standing alone before the viewport, staring at the blue glow of distant Earth. We save worlds, he murmured, but we can't save them from themselves. He knew what would come next. History always repeated itself. Someone would mistake restraint for weakness, mercy for vulnerability, and when they did, humanity would be forced to remind them again what it meant to provoke Earth. And just as he feared, whispers began again in the outer sectors, whispers of rebellion, resentment, jealousy. The same old poisons that had plagued the galaxy long before humans ever arrived. Species that had once ruled their regions now watched as Earth became the center of every trade and alliance. Terran ships patrolled not because they wanted control but because others asked for it. Yet the sight of those silent gray ships filled too many hearts with unease. They think they own the stars, muttered one alien captain, but they're just hiding their true nature. Conspiracy followed paranoia, and soon small skirmishes erupted across distant worlds. Hidden factions testing Terran patience, ambushing patrols, attacking convoys, but humanity didn't retaliate with rage. They responded with precision. Every attack was answered not with fleets but with specialists, quiet teams that entered enemy strongholds unseen, dismantling entire rebellions without leaving a mark. And when questioned by the Council, Earth simply replied, situation neutralized. No explanations, no evidence, no trail, just resolution. To those who served under Admiral Hale, this wasn't strategy, it was philosophy. Every human soldier understood the rule. Wars are loud, but real victories are silent, and that silence became the most feared sound in the galaxy, the kind that came right before a Terran fleet arrived. On the planet Vornis, where a rebellion against the Council had grown too bold, the rebels boasted that Earth wouldn't interfere. They fired on Terran relief ships and broadcast their defiance across the stars, laughing that the humans only fight when attacked. But the next sunrise on Vornis was different. The sky turned dark as a shadow fell across the horizon, hundreds of Terran transports descending in perfect formation, no warning, no speeches. Only one message transmitted to every screen. Stand down. Now. The rebels refused, and within hours, the uprising ended without a single building destroyed, every leader captured, every weapon disarmed, every life spared. When asked how, the survivors gave only one answer: they were everywhere. Back on Earth, the people lived quietly. Their cities rebuilt from wars long past now stood as fortresses of peace. Children grew up never hearing the sound of air raid sirens. Old veterans taught discipline instead of hate. The army wasn't just soldiers anymore. It was a symbol, a promise that humanity would never be victims again. Admiral Hale walked through the training fields where new recruits marched in rows, their movements sharp and steady, instructors shouting commands in perfect rhythm. He watched silently as thousands of boots struck the ground in unison, the same sound that had once silenced the galaxy. They learn fast, said General Voss beside him. Hale nodded slowly. Too fast, maybe, she frowned. You think it'll happen again? He turned to her, eyes distant. It always does. Someone will forget. And when they do, we'll remind them, just like we did the last time. Across the stars, the old empires watched Earth grow stronger. They called for unity. But unity built on fear is only another form of tension. The Council tried to limit Terran expansion, declaring new trade laws and fleet restrictions. But enforcement proved impossible. Terran engineers simply built faster, smarter, quieter. Their ships hidden in orbit around unnamed worlds, their outposts invisible until needed. And when the Council demanded inspection, Earth agreed with polite smiles and gave them access to decoys, empty installations filled with nothing but shadows and silence. The Council left more afraid than reassured. In time, whispers became more again. Stories passed among travelers about human fleets that could appear anywhere, about soldiers who fought without sound, about a commander who never raised his voice but whose orders shaped the galaxy. Parents told their children bedtime tales of the Terrans who kept the stars safe, of the march that never stopped, of the army that never slept, But in dark corners, others whispered a different story, that one day, humanity would decide that the galaxy's lessons were over, that one day the professionals would stop holding back. And when that day came, nothing would remain but the echo of their boots. On the bridge of the Resolute, Hale received the latest transmission. Reports of growing alliances against Earth. Fear turning once again to hostility. He read it in silence, then closed the file, his voice calm when he spoke. Prepare the fleets, not for war, but for memory. His officers exchanged glances, unsure what he meant. But his expression said enough. He wasn't preparing to conquer, he was preparing to remind. And when the engines of the Terran armada ignited once more, the stars themselves seemed to dim. The galaxy watched in terrified silence, remembering what it had forgotten. The sound of human armies marching not for conquest, but for order, for peace, for something greater than survival. And as the first ships vanished into the black, one truth echoed across the void. The galaxy might forget many things, but it would never again forget the sound of humanity moving as one. That the hum of Terran engines became the heartbeat of the galaxy, a rhythm no one could silence. Wherever those grey ships appeared, war stopped, and the stars held their breath. It wasn't peace that followed. It was submission, quiet and reluctant, but real. Every world knew by now that when humanity moved, it wasn't to conquer, it was to end things. Yet that truth terrified the old powers even more, because an army that didn't fight for greed or revenge could not be predicted or bribed, and so they began plotting in silence, whispering in shadowed corners, weaving alliances built not from trust but from fear of one name, Earth. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, the Chancellor's voice trembled as he spoke. They hold too much influence, their fleets patrol our sectors, their presence grows with every passing day. If we do nothing, we'll wake up one morning and find ourselves living in their empire. The hall buzzed with nervous agreement, but one elder delegate, his skin pale from age, whispered something no one wanted to hear. It's not an empire, he said. It's a warning, and it's working. Admiral Jonathan Hale knew of these whispers. He read them in intercepted reports, in diplomatic messages disguised as trade updates. He knew the Council was uniting again, not for balance, but for fear. Humanity had given the galaxy order, yet it had also given it a mirror, and most races didn't like what they saw staring back. Discipline, precision, mercy. These were things they had long abandoned. Hale stood aboard the Resolute watching the slow drift of stars beyond the viewport. His reflection faint in the glass, his second officer, Captain Yora Lennox, spoke softly behind him. They're calling it the Concord Pact, 7 races united to restrict Terran movement. They say it's for peace. Hale's lips barely moved. Peace is always the first lie before a war. His voice was quiet, controlled, but beneath it was an old sadness, the kind that only comes from watching history repeat itself. Have we mobilized the border fleets? He asked. Yes, sir. Silent readiness across all sectors. Good, he replied. We'll let them think we're unprepared. It'll make them hesitate. In the shadows of the Concord's hidden assembly, the same species that once laughed at humanity now spoke in fearful tones. We must strike before they do, growled a Zyrak general, his scales dull with tension. If we wait, they'll swallow us whole. The Vetari envoy countered. You saw what happened to the Dominion. You saw Eden 3. They don't need to strike. They just appear, and then it's over. But greed always finds an audience, and fear always finds a leader. A new figure rose among them. A tall being from the shadow worlds of Clyros, known only as the strategist, whose voice was calm and deadly. Humans rely on control, he said. Break their control and they crumble. They are not gods. They're creatures of habit, of order, and order can be corrupted. He revealed his plan: cyberstrikes, interference waves, targeting human AI systems, cutting their fleets off from each other. We won't fight their guns, he said, we'll fight their silence. The operation began with a whisper, unknown to most of the galaxy, deep inside the networks that connected the Terran colonies. Strange codes began to appear, data corrupted, relays flickering, ships momentarily losing contact before recovering. It was subtle, surgical, and for a while even Earth didn't notice, until one day, a Terran patrol near the Draco Rim went silent. No explosion, no distress call, just gone. Hale stared at the blank screen in his command center, the report flashing red. Find them, he said, his tone flat but his eyes alive with fire. Find out who thinks they're clever. 4 days the fleet scoured the void, until they found debris, no damage, no battle. But signs of systems shutting down mid-flight, manual overrides sealed, crew frozen in emergency stasis. It's interference, said the engineer. Something rewrote their command protocols. Hale's jaw clenched. So, they've learned to whisper back. The council denied everything, of course, their words honeyed and hollow. We would never violate your sovereignty. The chancellor insisted, but Hale wasn't a politician. He didn't believe in words, only actions. He ordered Operation Echo, a silent response, not to destroy but to show. Within 72 hours, every major data hub of the Concord Pact went dark. Their communications froze, their ships couldn't move, their colonies cut off from the stars. And then, through every screen, through every broadcast, through every network, a single Terran message appeared: we can hear you too. The panic that followed was biblical. Planets shutting down trade, militaries scrambling, leaders shouting orders that couldn't be delivered because their systems were still in Terran hands. But humanity did nothing else. No attack, no speech, just silence, and that silence said everything. The message was clear. Earth didn't need permission to defend itself. It never did. When the systems finally came back online, the council met in emergency session again. Their voices shaken, their arrogance gone. We can't fight them, one admitted. Then what do we do? Asked another. And again the old vet Harry Elder spoke, his crystalline body faintly glowing. You stop pretending you can control what you don't understand. But for every wise voice there were 10 foolish ones, and pride is a disease that spreads faster than reason. The strategists stepped forward again. They will fall, not to our weapons, but to their nature. Humans act without approval, without consensus. That's their weakness. Their arrogance will undo them. We just have to wait. Back on Earth, Hale received the latest intelligence. Reports of new fleets gathering in the outer rim. He listened to it all in silence, his officers uneasy. Sir, should we strike first? Captain Lennox asked. Hale shook his head. No, let them gather. Let them believe they're ready. Then we'll show them what readiness really means. He turned to the window, the Earth rising blue beneath his feet. The same planet that had birthed 1,000 years of warriors, dreamers, and survivors. We've been underestimated for centuries, he said softly. We've grown stronger every time. They think they can handle us because we speak softly, because we fight clean. But when they cross the line again, we'll remind them what happens when professionals stop holding back. And in that moment, across the stars, the Terran fleets began to move again, slow and deliberate. The same quiet grace that once made the galaxy tremble. From Mars to Titan to the edge of Andromeda, engines lit the dark, blue fire reflecting on the cold faces of soldiers who knew what was coming. They didn't march for glory or vengeance. They marched because it was necessary, because once again, the universe had forgotten the lesson humanity taught it long ago. Never mistake silence for weakness. As the fleets formed into perfect lines, the command signal pulsed through the void. Hale's voice clear and calm. Begin the alignment. No one outside humanity knew what it meant, but the galaxy was about to find out. Terran ships shifted position, forming patterns so vast they stretched across light years. Each formation precise, mathematical, terrifying in its scale. From far away, they looked like constellations. Stars that moved with purpose, ancient patterns reborn in steel and light. And when the last ship locked into place, a new message went out. One that reached every corner of the galaxy. The professionals are awake. And that night, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy prayed. The stars themselves seemed to tremble the night the Terran fleets aligned, the vast formations spanning systems, millions of ships moving with silent grace, their engines burning blue across the dark, not in aggression but in warning. For weeks the galaxy watched, holding its breath, waiting for the humans to strike. But the strike never came. Only silence, only stillness. And that silence became the loudest sound in history. No one dared move, no one dared speak too loudly, because everyone knew what it meant. Earth wasn't preparing for war, Earth was ready for one. In the Council's grand chamber, fear had replaced arrogance completely. The Chancellor's voice broke as he addressed the assembly. We wanted balance, he said, but what we've created is a god. No one laughed this time. Not even the Zyrak generals, not even the strategist who once promised to break humanity. All of them sat in silence, eyes fixed on the hologram of Terran formations spanning entire sectors. a wall of living fire stretching through space, too precise to comprehend, too vast to defy. Meanwhile, aboard the Resolute, Admiral Jonathan Hale stood at the command deck, his reflection against the stars almost ghost-like, his voice calm as he spoke into the open channel. "Transmit my words to the Council, unfiltered." His comms officer hesitated. "Sir, are you sure?" Hale nodded. "It's time they hear the truth." Across every Council world, the broadcast appeared without warning, the image of the Terran admiral staring into the lens with unflinching eyes, his words simple, his tone steady. "For centuries, you've mocked, provoked, and feared us. You've studied our wars but never our reasons. You believed discipline meant weakness, that silence meant hesitation, and that mercy meant submission. You were wrong on every count." His gaze hardened. "Humanity doesn't fight for conquest. We fight to remind the universe what happens when chaos forgets its place." He paused, the stars flickering behind him like dying embers. "We didn't build armies to rule. We built them because someone had to take responsibility for peace. And when you push too far, when you forget what restraint costs, we're the ones who pay the price for your arrogance. We don't seek war, but we never run from it either." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy frozen in silence once again. Across the far sectors, the Concord fleets began to hesitate, their captains arguing in fear. "If we engage, we die," one said. "If we retreat, we lose everything," another replied. No one wanted to be the one who provoked the Terrans. Even the strategist who had engineered the Grand Alliance sat in his command ship staring at the data feeds of Terran fleet movement. Lines of light moving like veins of energy through the dark. Each step measured, calculated, alive. "They're not armies," he whispered. "They're systems, self-aware, self-controlled, unified." And when one of his aides asked timidly, "Do we attack, sir?" he didn't answer, because deep down, even he understood that attacking Earth wasn't war. It was suicide written in slow motion. Then came the event that changed everything, a spark of arrogance from a single Concord captain stationed near the Vega frontier. His sensors picked up a small Terran patrol ship, a lone scout surveying the border. "We can't let them enter our space," he said, ignoring the fear of his crew. "One ship won't matter." And with that, he ordered his fleet to open fire. The energy beams cut through the void, striking the Terran vessel. It didn't explode. It didn't send a distress call. It simply disappeared, and for a brief, quiet moment, the Concord crews began to cheer. "We did it!" someone shouted. "We hit them!" But in that instant, the stars dimmed, the light around them fading as the sensors screamed. One by one, every Concord ship system shut down. Lights flickered, engines died, and then, above them, the void split open, and the Terran armada emerged. They didn't fire. They didn't speak. They simply appeared. Thousands of ships surrounding the Concord fleet, motionless, patient, suffocating in their stillness. And then, one transmission cut through the darkness. A single Terran voice, cold and clear. "You fired first. You will remember that for the rest of your lives." The humans didn't destroy them, didn't retaliate. They simply disabled every weapon, every engine, every reactor, leaving the fleet adrift, perfectly intact, powerless, floating in shame. And when rescue teams from the Concord arrived days later, they found every log wiped clean, every system locked with one phrase looping on every console: "We could have ended you." The story spread faster than light, faster than fear. Worlds that once doubted humanity now whispered prayers in Terran names. The Council disbanded the Concord within a week. No one wanted to risk extinction by pride again. And for the first time in galactic history, peace lasted, not because of treaties or compromise, but because one species refused to let chaos win. Earth withdrew its fleets quietly, dismantling outposts, returning to the calm shadow it preferred. Humanity didn't want empires, they wanted order, and order was something they carried in their bones. Years passed, then decades, and the galaxy began to rebuild itself around the quiet power that had saved it. Human advisors trained alien officers, Terran engineers rebuilt shattered worlds, and Terran medics healed both friend and foe alike. Yet no one ever forgot, not truly, because every time an argument between empires grew too loud, every time fleets began to gather again, the stars themselves would seem to flicker faintly, and the whispers would return. "Don't forget Earth is watching." It became legend, a bedtime story, a law of the cosmos. Never wake the professionals. Admiral Hale grew older, his hair silver, His eyes still sharp, he retired to the quiet plains of Mars where he watched the sun rise through the thin red sky. Children from across the colonies visited him, asking questions about the wars. Were they afraid of us? One boy asked. Hale smiled faintly. At first they laughed, then they feared, and finally, they understood. Understood what? The boy asked, his eyes wide. Hale's gaze turned distant. That discipline beats power. That mercy is stronger than hate, and that peace is not given. It's enforced by those who remember what war costs. And so, the galaxy moved on, but it never forgot the march that once shook the stars, because sometimes, when the night grew too quiet, when the wind of the cosmic void drifted through old ruins and silent outposts, travelers claimed they could still hear it. The faint echo of 1,000 synchronized boots striking metal decks somewhere in the dark. The ghost of an army that had once reminded creation itself what fear truly meant, not the fear of death, but the fear of facing something too disciplined to hate you, too human to forgive you, and too professional to ever lose. In the end, the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest weapon was not their fleet, not their technology, not even their strength. It was their silence, the kind that waits, watches, and strikes only when the universe forgets who taught it the meaning of respect. And as the stars continued their endless dance, one truth remained etched in time, eternal and unchallenged. They mocked Earth's armies once, but never again.